The salt-laced wind whipped across the ramparts of Dragonstone as Yara Greyjoy stood atop the craggy parapet, her braided hair flying wild around her face. Below, dragonfire smoke curled into the dusk sky, painting the sea in smoldering hues of crimson and ash. Behind her, the iron-studded door of the castle's great hall loomed, and inside, the Queen of Dragons awaited. Yara gazed out toward the horizon, where the vast expanse of Westeros lay divided and broken, ripe for new alliances. She turned at the soft click of boots on the stone. Daenerys Targaryen entered, her pale hair gleaming like spun silver, her violet eyes alight with the fierce determination that had earned her the throne once, and would earn it again. The Mother of Dragons moved with the sure grace of one born to command both men and beasts, her fur-lined cloak trailing behind her like a banner of white flame. "Your Grace," Yara said, inclining her head. But as her gaze lifted to meet Daenerys, formalities fell away. There was a spark of recognition, a shared history of exile and loss. Each had lost a throne before, and each had fought to reclaim power in a realm that prized cruelty over compassion. "Lady Greyjoy," Daenerys replied softly, stepping closer. "You came." Yara's lips curved into a challenging smile. "I came because the Iron Islands will not bend the knee to folly. The Seven Kingdoms await a ruler who knows the price of the sea and of mercy." A silence stretched between them, charged with the weight of possibility. At last, Daenerys' smile mirrored Yara's challenge. "Then let us speak of unity." The war councils of Dragonstone were not what Yara had expected. Instead of stony silence and rigid formality, she found tables draped in maps, candles flickering like watchful eyes. Tyrion Lannister pored over the alignments of houses, his clever hands tracing supply lines. Missandei and Ser Jorah debated the loyalties of the Dornish. Grey Worm stood sentinel by the hearth, silent as the grave. At its head sat Daenerys, radiant in cloak of sun-white dragonhide, her dragons, Drogon, Regal, and Viserion, roosting atop the towers, their great forms blotting out the starlight. Yara crossed the hall with measured steps, her iron mail glinting in the torchlight. She laid a leather-bound volume, her family's ledger of fleet positions and island defenses, beside Tyrion's maps Doughty. "These are the holdings of House Greyjoy," she said. 20 longships, ported from Pike to Farwind's Town, with crews ready to strike upon your signal. Our sailors are unmatched on the open sea. Tyrion glanced up, his usual smirk tempered by respect. "A formidable addition." He looked to Daenerys. "With the Iron Fleet under our banner, the reach of the crown will extend from the shivering sea to the stepstones. No foe at sea will dare to challenge us." Daenerys nodded, her calm voice carrying the authority of a queen accustomed to storms. "And with the allegiance of the Ironborn, we bring not only ships but warriors born of salt and steel. I ask, will you stand with me, Yara Greyjoy, as my hand of the sea? Will you pledge your sword to the restoration of the realm?" Yara felt the eyes of every assembled advisor upon her. The Ironborn were a people born of rebellion. They worshipped the drowned god and scorned kings who ruled from ivory towers. Yet Daenerys had earned her vengeance on those who had chained her, freed the slaves of Yunkai and Meereen, and shown mercy tempered by justice. The words found her before thought could seize them. "I will," she said, "not as a mere bannerman but as consort in rule. Let the Iron Throne be no longer a seat of tyranny, but a beacon of strength for all." Word of this unprecedented alliance spread like wildfire. In Old Town, maesters whispered of the gray-haired pirate queen pledging fealty to a Targaryen, while ravens flew with missives bearing the Greyjoy and Targaryen sigils interlaced. The lords of the Reach spat curses in the gardens of Highgarden. The Freys bickered over whether to betray both queens or neither. In the Red Keep of King's Landing, once a symbol of Lannister might, King Tommen's airless rule had collapsed, the throne empty but for broken glass and tarnished steel. Now Greyjoy longships massed off Blackwater Bay, their lanterns glimmering like a host of fallen stars. On the eve of their departure for King's Landing, Yara and Daenerys stood on the deck of the Iron Victory, the flagship of the Greyjoy fleet. The sea rolled beneath them in restless waves, and the sky glowed with the promise of dawn. Dragons circled overhead, their roars echoing like thunder. Yara placed her hand upon the scourge of Venus, her great helm polished to a gleam that caught the light of Drogon's fire. "Are you afraid?" Daenerys asked, standing at her side. The first gray light of morning painted her features in gold and rose. Yara laughed, low and raspy. "Fear is for those who cannot command the unknown. I fear only dishonor. Yet in this campaign we sail not to pillage, but to rebuild." Daenerys smiled, the warmth in her eyes as fierce as any dragon's flame. "And when we sit the Iron Throne, we will build a realm where no man's fate is sealed by his birth." Yara nodded, the weight of her house's history upon her shoulders. She thought of Pike, its stone walls battered by sea storms, its salt-sprayed battlements lined with banners of krakens. In the heart of those islands, her people thrived on survival and resilience. Now those same strengths would anchor a new era, forged in blood and justice alike. "Then let the world watch," Yara said. "For House Greyjoy and the House of the Dragon shall stand united, and none shall overturn the weirwood roots of our victory." They landed at dawn on the shores of King's Landing. The Iron Fleet's longships beached upon Blackwater Rush. Oars buried in sand, sails lowered in respectful silence. Soldiers of the Unsullied marched in immaculate formation, halberds flashing. Knights of Dorne and the Stormlands flanked them, banners snapping in the sea breeze. Yara rode at Daenerys' side, her red-gold armor etched with the Kraken's sigil, her red-gold cloak billowing. Daenerys wore a gown of dragon-scale silk, her crown wrought of molten gold and rubies. The city huddled behind its walls, windows shuttered, citizens peering through cracks as the allied host approached the great gates. Men-at-arms bristled upon the battlements, crossbows cocked, pikes leveled. For a heartbeat, all held its breath. Then Yara lifted her voice in a howl that carried over the waters. "Ironborn," she cried, "keepers of the sea, we stand an arm's length from the realm's throne. Today, we challenge the tyranny of the old ways. We challenge the foolishness of lords who oppress their people. We challenge those who would see the small trampled by the great." Bam! From the ranks rose the clash of arms against shields, a thunderous oath. The Greyjoy soldiers bared their teeth in savage grins. The Unsullied dipped their spears in the river water, a silent testament to their honor. Daenerys lifted her arms, and the sky split with dragonfire as Drogon, his scales as black as the void between stars, unleashed a torrent of flame that lit the city in blazing orange. The battered gates buckled under battering rams of oak and iron. Yara led the vanguard through the breach, stepping into the streets where the stones ran red with dawn's light and the blood of those who would resist. There was no mercy for those who raised blade against their liberators, no trial for those who would spill innocent blood. But for every tyrant felled, a common man found hope rekindled in his heart. In the throne room, the Iron Throne stood like a monolith of bones, its twisted steel blades rising like dead trees in a blighted wood. Daenerys approached beneath the banners of House Targaryen and House Greyjoy entwined, Yara at her shoulder. The hall was scarred by siege, pillars cracked, tapestries torn, pools of discarded Lannister gold glinting in the gutter. A hush fell as the new queen ascended the steps. Yara stepped forward, her cloak swirling, and presented a wreath of iron and dragon smoke. "By the power vested in us by conquest and by mercy," she intoned, "we crown Daenerys Stormborn, first of her name, Queen of the Andals and the First Men, Protector of the Realm, Lady of the Seven Kingdoms, and Queen of the Iron Islands." Daenerys sank to her knees, the iron wreath placed upon her head. Yara stood behind her, hand on the pommel of her sword. The three dragons roared in the sky above, a triumvirate of flames heralding a new dawn. "Rise, your grace," Yara commanded, and Daenerys rose, her violet eyes shining with triumph and compassion. Yara then turned, speaking to the assembled lords and captains. "Let this day be known as the first feast of the new throne. Let the seas be open to all who sail in peace. Let the weak find succor under our rule. Let the realm stand united by iron will and dragon's fire, by salt and by blood." And as cheers echoed beneath the vaulted roof, Yara Greyjoy, Hand of the Sea and consort of the Dragon Queen, felt the promise of change stir in her chest. Westeros had known cruelty and chaos. Now it would know strength tempered by justice. A kingdom ruled by fire and steel, in equal measure. In that moment, she vowed the Iron Throne would endure, not as a seat of fear, but as a beacon of hope for all the Seven Kingdoms. The aftermath of the coronation echoed through King's Landing with a trembling hush that lasted but a heartbeat before erupting into revelry. Yet within the jubilant cries of the crowd, Yara Greyjoy felt the undercurrents of war far from ended. She stood by Daenerys' side on the balcony overlooking the city's newly liberated streets, the iron lattices of the Red Keep framing them like the ribs of some great beast laid low. Below, joyous families danced in the mud-streaked roadways. Freed servants clung to their children. Reavers who had once terrorized villages saluted the banners of dragon and kraken in awe rather than defiance. Daenerys turned to her, bronze eyes softer than any greeting of steel could muster. "What troubles you, my Hand of the Sea?" she asked, voice the hush of dawn. Yara gazed outward, the memory of broken oaths flashing behind her gray gaze. "I see ashes and embers, your grace. A realm may kneel at our feet, but the fires of resentment still smolder in every holdfast and hamlet beyond these walls." She leaned against the cold stone. "Our victory is but the first stone laid in a foundation that must withstand the greatest storm Westeros has seen." Daenerys placed a hand upon Yara's armored shoulder. "Then let us build strong walls, walls of justice and mercy. So firm that no man can wrench them down." Below, the trumpets of the first feast of the new throne blared in proclamation that wine and roasted boar would flow in every hearth. Yet Yara's mind drifted to Pike, to the pitched battle for Saltcliffe where her brother's sons had fallen, and to the scattered Ironborn loyalists who still sailed unknown waters, waiting for false signs of weakness. The true test lay not in the gates of King's Landing, but in the gray ruins of the north, in the green fields of the Reach, in the arid dunes of Dorne, and in the untamed seas beyond the Shield Islands. 2 days later, the great hall of the Red Keep trembled with whispered counsel. Daenerys presided upon the Iron Throne, catching the morning light in her silver hair. Yara sat to her right, the only one besides Sir Barristan Selmy permitted so close. Across the obsidian depths of the chamber, the lords of Westeros squirmed upon their benches, each obliged to vow fealty anew to their queen. Tyrion Lannister stepped forward, pale-garbed and weary-eyed, holding a parchment scroll stamped with the signet of the new queen. This proclamation of unity declares that all 6 kingdoms shall raise levies not for conquest, but for defense against the foes that still linger: bandits, pirate lords, and the last remnants of Lannister loyalists. He cleared his throat. "It is also written that the Iron Fleet, under the command of Lady Yara Greyjoy, will patrol the coasts to ensure the seas remain safe for trade and travel." A murmur rolled through the hall. Lords and ladies exchanged glances. An Ironborn admiral commanding Westerosi fleets was unheard of. One older man, Lord Rowan of Goldengrove, daunted by the Kraken sigil upon Yara's breastplate, spoke. "And what of the Reach? Shall we bow to the pirate queen who scours our vineyards under the guise of defense?" Yara's gaze flared. "Rowan, your vineyards are ours to protect, not pillage. The seas north of Highgarden are as treacherous as the Dornish passes. Were it not for the Iron Fleet, your grain convoys would be sunk by sell sails and storms alike. My ships will safeguard every merchantman bearing the crown's sigil. The Reach of House Greyjoy will be your bulwark against ruin." "Then see you are." Daenerys rose, her voice cooling the chamber like glaze on steel. "Lady Yara's justice shall be swift and harsh to any who prey upon the innocent. The Reach will prosper as it never has under tyrants, nor under pirates." She raised her hand. "All those who would oppose the proclamation of unity, speak now, or stand silent before the mercy of the throne." Silence stretched taut, and then the lords bowed. The moment passed, and with it, the last embers of open defiance. Yara felt the tension loosen as if a great tide had receded. Yet beneath the grandeur of new oaths, darker storms brewed. That night, Yara convened her own council within the narrow corridors of the keep's lower ward. Her captains and lieutenants from the Iron Fleet gathered around a wooden table, scarred by years of salt and smoke. The flicker of torchlight danced across their faces. Sea-weathered, scarred, but loyal. "Reports from the Western Isles," Yara began, voice low. "The Skagosi have not answered our ravens. The clan Tollet at Hammerhorn grow bold. Their longships ply the narrow sea unchallenged. We must assert our presence." Her first mate, Captain Brond of Black Harlaw, spat onto the planks. "Lady, the Greyjoy sigil brings fear and respect where it sails. We should descend in force, pillage their shores, and show them the price of defiance." Yara shook her head. "We do not pillage. We liberate. We show the clans that they too may feast under the banners of the dragon and kraken. Offer them mercy in exchange for loyalty. Those who refuse must be dealt with, but we are not savages." "Ben?" Brond glared but bowed. "As you command." She turned to her sister's grandson, Torwin Greyjoy, face still boyish but eyes hard as flint. "Torwin, you will lead a detachment north to Saltcliff. Secure the seals, rebuild the defenses, and offer the local lords the chance to swear fealty. Give them 2 days to decide." He straightened. "They will bend the knee, or suffer the sea's vengeance." "Good," Yara said. "And the others?" Her captains exchanged looks. Yara continued. "We sail to the Stepstones next. The Ironborn who settled there have grown decadent. They feast on abandon, forgetting the old ways. Show them a crown tempered by equality. Let them know that power under the true king is not vigilante rule, but service to the realm." A murmur spread around the table at the mention of Daenerys as true king, but none dared question her choice. Yara felt the weight of her vows settle over her like a second skin. This was no mere rebellion now, but the forging of a new order. Meanwhile, Daenerys moved through the Red Keep like a living flame. She visited the Maiden Vault to free those once used as hostages, walked among the smallfolk quarter to hear stories of hardship, and held tribunal in the Sept of Baelor, ensuring justice for those wronged by the chaos of the past. Everywhere she went, the people saw the promise of a better life. Yet the deeper she delved into the realm's wounds, the more she realized how many scars remained hidden beneath the stones. One twilight, she sought Yara upon the ramparts. The air was bracing, the sea's roar a constant companion. Yara stood alone, gazing across the salt-dark surges as a lone crow wheeled overhead. "They call you the breaker of chains," Yara said without turning. "But chains are not only manacles. They are customs, debts, old grudges. You have freed slaves, but have we freed the realm from its own past?" Daenerys joined her, hair drifting like mist around her shoulders. "That is why I need you at my side. You remember the old ways better than I. You know what it means to owe a debt, to repay honor or slay betrayal." Yara let the wind scatter her hair. "And you teach me mercy. Between us, we balance fire and steel." She stepped closer to the edge. "Tell me, Khaleesi, will this alliance last when the dragons are gone?" Daenerys placed a hand over Yara's, warmth in her touch. "Our bond is forged in blood and respect. When the dragons are ashes, men will still remember that a queen and a sea queen stood together against tyranny. That memory will live longer than flame." "And now," Yara nodded, the promise settling in her bones. "Then let the forging continue." Thus began the true test of their union. Not conquest, but governance. In the weeks that followed, they dispatched envoys to every corner of the Seven Kingdoms. To Winterfell, where Sansa Stark hesitated before the Ironborn envoy, until word traveled that Yara's forces had rebuilt the broken walls. To the Eyrie, where giant tracks of dragonfire cooled into cautious respect. To Sunspear, where Prince Doran's daughter offered peace in exchange for shared ships to patrol the summer sea. Yet dissent smoldered in the shadows. Whispers of betrayal drifted through taverns. In the north, a remnant of the Boltons raised banners of red flayed flesh. In the Vale, Lord Royce questioned whether the Kraken's embrace could ever be trusted. And beyond Westeros, in the Golden Empire of Yeti, merchants prepared to prey once more, upon weakened trade routes. Yara convened a war council aboard the Iron Victory, anchored off the shores of Dragonstone for a brief respite. There, beneath the carved wooden ceilings, she and Daenerys laid plans to dispatch the Unsullied northward, bolster defenses at Moat Cailin, and redirect newly raised levies to quell the Bolton uprising. The dragons circled overhead, their shadows passing like wings of prophecy across the faces of men. When the council ended, Daenerys followed Yara onto the deck. Stars scattered across the sky above, and Yara could almost trace the ancient dragon song in their silvery light. "We ride again at dawn," Yara said, voice low with resolve. "The north will bend, or we will break them upon those same stones." Daenerys' hand found the hilt of her whip. "Then let them feel our unity. Every man who rises against us will know the fury of fire and iron." Yara's laughter was soft as rolling waves. "And those who kneel will find peace beyond any they have known." They clasped forearms, their unspoken oath sealing more than alliance. It bound the Ironborn and the Dragonborn in a covenant to remake the realm. Together, they would test whether a queen tempered by mercy could rule alongside a sea queen tempered by honor, and whether the Iron Throne, long a seat of cruelty, could finally become the pivot upon which the Seven Kingdoms turned toward a new dawn. And so, as the winds shifted and the tide turned, Yara Greyjoy and Daenerys Targaryen set forth once more into storm and shadow, in pursuit not of mere victory, but of a legacy that would endure in song and story long after their dragons became legend. Oh, K. Dawn. The dawn broke pale and silver over Dragonstone, the sea below still churning with the memory of the Iron Fleet's passage. Beneath the castle's craggy cliffs, Yara Greyjoy's longships lay hidden in shadowed coves, their crews preparing quietly for the march north. Daenerys Targaryen stood on the battlements above, watching as the first light touched Rhaegal's emerald scales and set Viserion's ivory hide ablaze. Drogon was already aloft, surveying the sea lanes and distant isles with unblinking eyes. Yara joined her, cloak drawn tight against the morning chill. "The men grow restless," she said. "They thirst for the next clash." Daenerys turned, pale hair billowing. "So do I," she admitted. "But haste can breed mistakes. The North is not like the South. Harsh, secretive, bound by oaths older than the Ironborn faith." Yara's gray eyes glinted. "Then we must move as swiftly as the tides, and with as little warning. Surprise is our greatest ally." Below, the war drums sounded in cadence, the call to arms that echoed out across the island battlements. Yara clapped her gauntleted hand on her sword hilt. "Let our drums speak for us. Let the North know that the price of defiance is the fury of iron and dragon fire alike." They set sail under a waning moon, the Iron Fleet splitting into 3 squadrons to mask their approach. Yara led one force under the Black Bar, skirting the western coastline before slipping into the narrow coves of the Western Sea. A second wing followed the Silver Tide, crossing to White Harbor under cover of nightfall. The third, under Torwin Greyjoy, forged north to White Harbor itself, cutting off any hopes of relief to the Boltons from Valeman volunteers. At dawn on the third day, Yara's contingent crept into the fog-blanketed estuary of Barrowton. The Boltons had garrisoned the town's stout walls, but their vigilance had grown lax amid rumors of peace. Yara's reavers struck with silent fury. Grappling hooks slashed ropes, ladders rose like ghostly pillars against the gray sky, and within moments, the walls were breached. A swirl of iron and cries, and the banners of House Bolton fell to the courtyard floor, replaced by dragon red and kraken black. Daenerys arrived atop Drogon before the sun had fully risen. His roar rattled the timbers of the keep, and Bolton survivors fell to their knees, hands raised. Yara stood at the gate, sword lowered. "Spare the blood of those who bend the knee," she commanded. "Spare their lives, and the realm will remember mercy as well as might." From the parapets, a lone Bolton knight, a gaunt man with a face like carved bone, stepped forward. He spat blood from the edge of his lip, then slowly knelt before Yara. "I bend the knee," he rasped. "My wrath is yours to command." Yara offered him a hand, pulling him to his feet. "Your oath is to Daenerys Targaryen, first of her name, and to me as her Hand of the Sea. May you serve with honor." 9. Behind her, Daenerys watched with quiet approval as Yara accepted the knight's braid of red hair, a Bolton token of fealty, and hung it on the wall beside her own blackened helm. Word of Barriston's swift subjugation spread like wildfire up the King's Road. The Unsullied marched in step behind Yara's forces, their silent discipline a potent symbol of the new order. Houses that had prepared banners of resistance instead opened their gates, sending ravens bearing offers of fealty. In White Harbor, Lord Manderley negotiated terms that would see his city spared and its ports contracted to the crown for grain shipments to the Iron Islands. In the Erie, Yara dispatched envoys promising safe trade through the Vale's high passes. If Lord Royce welcomed the Ironborn as rightful protectors, even in the Riverlands, land of shifting loyalties, small folk rose in revolt against absentee lords, until the crown's banner flew above Raventry Hall. Yet not all bent easily. In the crags of Greywater Watch, a remnant of the Frey forces had taken refuge, led by Sir Lucas Frey, brother to the traitor at the Twins. Daenerys resolved to root them out personally. She rode Drogon through the swamps, torchfire from his jaws clearing pathways as direwolves fled before them. Yara followed on her galley, dragonsteel sword in hand. They found Frey's camp in a hollow of black trees. Frey's men ringed about their lord. Daenerys landed with a thunderous crash, wings folding like torn sails. Yara leapt from Drogon's flank, sword singing. The Freys fell before them in a wave of crimson. Some surrendered, trembling at the sight of dragon and kraken united. Others died screaming. At the center, Sir Lucas Frey trembled on bent knee, his sword slick with his men's blood. "Kneel," Daenerys commanded, her voice low as the hills. Frey did so, tears in his eyes. Yara stepped forward and pressed her blades flat against his throat. "Swear fealty to the Queen, and you may live to serve." Frey quailed beneath the cold iron. "I swear it." Yara withdrew her sword, stepping back. "Then live," she said. "But know this, betray her trust again, and the sea will claim you without mercy." By Midwinter's turn, the Boltons lay broken, the Freys scattered, and even House Lannister, hollowed by defeat and desertion, had sent envoys to sue for peace. Yet the true challenge lay in holding such a realm together over harsh winters and harsher resentments. Daenerys called a great council at Winterfell, the seat of the Starks, newly held by Sansa Stark and Jon Snow. The courtyards were white with frost, but banners of dragon and kraken flew beside the direwolf and the crow. Yara stood at Daenerys' side as the council assembled. The new Hand of the North, Jon Snow, looked at her askance. Sansa Stark offered a curt nod. Grey Worm watched impassively. Tyrion Lannister, seated below the dais, rubbed at a swelling bruise from an ill-advised joust. Daenerys spoke first, her voice echoing against stone walls carved by ancient hands. "We have conquered the realm by fire and iron, but we must bind it through justice and mercy. Each lord here owes fealty to the crown. Each vassal owes service. But we ask not for tribute alone, but for counsel. This realm is too vast to be ruled by decree alone." "Then, Amo." Sansa rose, pale and composed. "The North remembers what it suffered under Boltons and Freys. We will swear fealty to Daenerys Targaryen, but only if the crown respects our ancient laws, the old ways of Winterfell, the right to call the banners for defense of the realm." Daenerys inclined her head. "So it shall be." She looked to Yara. "Make it law." Yara nodded. "By the Hand of the Sea, let it be written. The North retains its ancient rights in exchange for fealty to the Iron Throne. No lord north of Moat Cailin shall march his banners beyond the neck without the crown's leave, nor be taxed beyond the levies for defense." "Now," murmurs rose among the assembly, but Sansa's stiff nod signaled approval, and the terms were etched into the great charter of the realm. In the weeks that followed, Yara and Daenerys turned their attentions south and west. The Reach, once the richest of all the kingdoms, lay in ruins from scorched battlefields. Vast granaries had rotted under siege, and starving peasants roamed the roads in ragged bands. Daenerys rode through the fields on Drogon's back, her whip coiled at her side as she questioned small folk on their needs. Yara flew overhead on Viserion, its pale underside a beacon of hope against gray skies. At Highgarden, the gates creaked open to reveal a courtyard of broken masonry and empty silk tents. The Tyrell scions had fled to Sunspear, leaving their ancestral seat to its fate. Yara dismounted at the shattered Highgarden sept, placing her hand on its ruined weirwood altar. "This land will bloom again," she vowed. "Under the banners of dragon and kraken, the Reach shall feed the realm once more." She and Daenerys decreed that grain stores from the Iron Islands, surprisingly bountiful after years of disciplined fishing and sea raids, would be sent south, and that the small folk would work the fields in exchange for protection and fair rents. Knights of the Reach, rebadged as Houses of the Crown, took oaths to rebuild estates and guard against banditry. But as the wheels of governance turned, so did shadows conspire. In Old Town, a secret cabal of maesters plotted to undermine the Targaryen claim, whispering that the dragons were tempests, soon to burn themselves out. In King's Landing, Pycelle's heir lurked among courtiers, forging rumors that Yara intended to carve an ironborn kingdom that would eclipse the crown. Even within the Red Keep, servants caught at strange hours copying letters from the small council table to unknown raven posts. Yara discovered the plot as the first snows of winter began to dust Dragonstone. She intercepted a courier on the eastern shore. The man bound in cord and clutching a sheaf of letters, sealed with the maester's chain sigil. Under the torchlight, she read of clandestine meetings in the Citadel's shadow, of plans to summon Dorne's former princes against the crown, and of a nightfall uprising in King's Landing timed to coincide with the next dragon flight. She carried the papers to Daenerys in the war chamber. The firelight danced across the queen's face as she studied the letters, lips pressed thin. "They would see us undone," she said finally. "They feared the unity we have forged." Yara met her gaze. "Then we must show them the strength of our covenant." She traced a finger along the parchment. "Strike at the source. We cannot allow these plots to fester." Daenerys nodded, resolve hardening. Rhaegal and Drogon will fly to Old Town under cover of storm. The Iron Fleet will sail upriver to blockade the harbor. We will root out the conspirators in their own halls. Under a moonless sky, the dragons rose from Dragonstow's heights. Yara led the naval force herself, wind whipping her cloak as the Greyjoy banners snapped in starlight. They slipped through the narrow sea, past the Stormlands and the Arbor, until they reached Old Town's honeyed walls. When the dragons roared, the Citadel's grand towers shook. Learning ravens, sent by Yara's spies among the acolytes, had ensured every traitorous maester was gathered in the hall beneath the starry weirwood mural. As Rhaegal's emerald flame and Drogon's coal-black inferno lit the courtyard, Yara's reavers poured in through scorched gates, shields raised and blades gleaming. Chaos reigned for a heartbeat before the conspirators fell to their knees. Smoke curling from their robes, Yara strode among them, sword held at rest. By the mercy of the crown, none shall die if they swear loyalty to Daenerys Stormborn. She watched as one by one they knelt, vows echoing against stone. Thus the citadel was tamed without bloodshed, save for the charred timbers of its northern tower. The maesters, humbled, pledged their wisdom to the crown, and Yara appointed a small council of trusted lore masters to oversee the archives. By the next turning of the year, the realm lay bound tighter than any chain. The Greyjoy ships patrolled every sea lane. The dragons roamed every sky. The small folk tilled fields in peace beneath watchful banners. The lords parleyed not of rebellion, but of commerce and festivals, held in honor of the twin queens. Yet Yara knew that peace was as fragile as spun silk. She watched Daenerys addressing the assembled commanders on Dragonstone's ramparts, each dragon sleeping at her feet, and felt the old stirring in her chest, a warrior's hunger for challenge, for the forging of legends. She touched the pommel of her blade. One day, she murmured to the silent sea, "They will sing of us as the ones who tamed the storm and tempered the flame." Daenerys turned, violet eyes meeting Yara's. "And we will be ready," she said softly. Together they stood, the Hand and the Queen, on the precipice of history, bound by honor, tempered by mercy, and unbreakable as the ironwood beneath their feet. And as their dragons spread wings to embrace the dawn, the world beyond Dragonstone stirred in wonder at the new age of dragon and kraken, ruling side by side over all the 7 kingdoms. Okay. Wow. I can continue the narrative, but to fit within message limits, I'll deliver it in sequential installments of roughly 1,500 words each. Here's the next installment in full prose, without subtitles. The first light of spring crept across the fields of the Reach, melting the last lingering snows that still clung to furrows and hedgerows. Under its pale glow, the scars of war began to fade, replaced by the timid green of new life. Yara Greyjoy stood at the prow of the Iron Victory as it sailed up the Mander, watching fishermen launch flatboats to harvest the swollen river. Downriver, the walls of Highgarden stood half-repaired, its broken towers now ringed by scaffolding as carpenters and masons worked in concert, the clang of hammers mingling with the cry of gulls overhead. Beside her, Daenerys Targaryen tucked her cloak close in the morning breeze, her gaze as bright as the dawn. "It is as you promised," she said softly. "The Reach breathes again." Yara offered a thin smile. "The people here have always lived by the land. Give them grain, tools, and fair rents, and they will repay you tenfold." She looked down to where small folk toiled in fields once trampled by armies. "Soon this river will carry more harvests south than ever before. And when it does, the crown will feed a realm that nearly starved itself to death." The Queen of Dragons nodded, her palm brushing the carved ivory scales of her dragon hook. "And your people?" she asked. "The Ironborn have never been farmers." Yara laughed, low and salty. "We will learn. If the riverside farms yield fair profit, we'll reward our crews with shares. The Iron Islands may yet become a place of orchards and gardens, rather than barren rock and salt." She paused, watching a plankyard unload barrels of salted fish. "Trade is the lifeblood of peace." They disembarked at Highgarden's new docks, where merchants from the Arbor and Old Town offered barrels of wine and honeyed mead. Knights of the Reach, their arms freshly polished, assisted Ironborn sailors from their longships. For a moment, Yara allowed herself a measure of pride. Here, in the very heart of one of Westeros' oldest powers, her banners flew not as tokens of conquest, but as symbols of partnership. Daenerys clasped her hand. "Together we will bind this land, not by force alone, but by prosperity." Yara met her queen's gaze. "And by trust. Let no man ever doubt that the Kraken's hand is as sure as the dragon's flame." A fortnight later, the newly christened Crown Council convened in King's Landing, now a city of cautious optimism, rather than fear. The Red Keep, though still pockmarked from siege, had been repainted in warm ochres and sea-blue fjord tones. Beneath its arches gathered representatives of every corner of the realm, Lords Stark and Manderly for the north, Lady Ceri Mallister for the Riverlands, Prince Trystane Martell for Dorne, Lord Tarly for the Reach, and in place of the late Lord Hightower, a young maester in plain russet robes, an envoy chosen by the Citadel to atone for the plots of their brethren. Tyrion Lannister, appointed Hand of the King's Landing District, presided over the meeting, his small frame dwarfed by the vaulted chamber. To his left sat Yara, her armor polished, but bearing streaks of mud from recent campaigns. To his right, Daenerys in a gown of pale sea green that swept the floor like foam upon a wave. "Today," Tyrion began, voice booming off stone, "we chart the course for the next year of rebuilding. Roads, ports, granaries, each must be restored without delay." He unfolded a parchment thick with annotations. "But first, we must finalize the charter on taxation." A chorus of assent rose. Here in King's Landing, Taxes had been so crippling under the Lannisters that many small folk had sold their children's heirlooms to survive. Now, Daenerys had pledged a fair levy, 1/10 of annual production, payable in coin or in kind, with exemptions for the poorest and a crown-funded seed grant for new farmers. Lord Tarley, a broad-shouldered man given to blunt speech, grunted. "My holdings yielded scant grain last autumn. I will pay, but only after my people have eaten." Daenerys inclined her head. "Then supply yourself from the royal granary first. The levy may follow on good harvest." She turned to Yara. "Extend the same terms to the Iron Islands. Allow my stores to shore up your fields before tribute begins." Yara leaned forward, eyes bright. "So it shall be. And I will send 1/3 of our yearly catch to your granaries in return." A promise that drew appreciative murmurs from the Reach and River representatives. Meanwhile, in the Vale, Lord Royce tested his oath with swift action. A band of mountain clans had raided a trade caravan bound for Gulltown, killing its guards and stealing its wares. Royce dispatching the Vale patrols had nearly incited a rebellion among the clans, who answered only to their own toothless mountain chieftains. Yara, learning of the unrest, insisted the Vale be offered the Iron Fleet's assistance, sending envoys to both Royce and the clan elders. She proposed a joint task force, Ironborn sailors to secure the narrow sea approaches, Vale archers to patrol the passes, and river trappers to rout bandits in the foothills. It was the first cooperative security pact between 3 kingdoms. At a meeting near the Fingers, Yara stood by the riverbank beneath a rainbowed waterfall. The elders, rugged men in bearskins, snarled defiance until Yara extended a measure of tribute. 3 longships provisioned for a season's fishing, in exchange for safe passage and toll-free trade. A silence followed, broken by the deepest elders' gravel-throated decree. "We keep the roads and waters, and you keep your ships. Aye. On those terms we bend the knee." Now, by summer's end, Vale merchants were traveling freely to Gulltown once more, escorted by Ironborn lookouts perched on crags. The narrow roads echoed not with hooves of war horses, but with merchant wagons laden with silk and cheese, olives and salted pork. In the Riverlands, Sansa Stark oversaw a novel experiment. A council of commons where representatives of the small folk could petition their lord directly. Held in the Great Sept at Harrenhal, the council convened beneath newly restored weirwood panels. Yara and Daenerys attended as honored guests. A humble farmer named Gendry Rivers, no relation to the Lannisters, rose to speak of ruined orchards. He pleaded for saplings from the arbor and minimal taxes until his trees bore fruit. Sansa nodded gravely. Daenerys promised seeds and skilled gardeners. Yara volunteered Ironborn builders to repair his collapsed orchard walls in exchange for a portion of the first harvest. The plan passed unanimously, a rare bond born of cooperation rather than command. "It is as it should be," Sansa observed to Yara afterward, the red-haired queen tracing a finger on a weirwood carving. "A realm that hears its people." Yara smiled. "A realm that listens will never fall to tyranny again." Yet shadows lurked even in triumph. In King's Landing, rumors circulated of a secret society calling itself the Black Kraken. Hardliners who decried the southern kingdom's reliance on foreign grain, who whispered that the Ironborn had sold out their heritage for silk and wine. Their graffido, an ink-black kraken entwined with a dragon's wing, appeared on city gates in the dead of night. Yara's scouts apprehended one such insurgent, a street urchin turned zealot. Dragged before Daenerys in the throne room, he spat curses at the tiled floor. "Your peace is a lie," he shouted. "The sea reavers will rise again. The true kraken will reclaim the Iron Islands." Yara's eyes narrowed. "We are not the people you remember." She stepped forward, voice calm as the deep sea. "We have risen from salt and ruin to build a new world, or watch it burn by your hand." She gestured, and the man was hauled away to the dungeons. "Let that be the last breath of rebellion in this city." Daenerys touched Yara's arm. "Your justice is swift and merciful." Yara shrugged. "Better that than endless vengeance." By autumn, the Alliance had transformed Westeros. The Iron Islands, once the poorest realm, now boasted shipyards forging vessels for peaceful trade. The Reach, once plundered by foreign armies, yielded a surplus of grain and fruit. The north, once threatened by bandits, secured its passes with new watchtowers. The Riverlands prospered under local councils. The Vale thrived in cooperation with its neighbors. Even Dorne, long isolated, sent envoys to trade. Each success reinforced the legend of the Queen of Dragons and her Hand of the Sea. Minstrels sang of their deeds in spoken ballads. About the time Yara taught the Dornish to fish for salt cod. How Daenerys interceded to spare an entire village of hedge knights. How dragons and ships escorted the poor to markets without fear. Paintings in the Red Keep's galleries depicted Yara and Daenerys side by side, their arms crossed, overseen by a weirwood crowned with dragon wings. Yet both women knew the greatest test was still to come. The long winter that would descend upon the entire continent. Rumors from beyond the wall, the whispers of wights reanimated by cold, of the dead stirring in haunted forest, had reached Dragonstone. And though peace ruled the south, the north braced for darkness. In the war chamber of Dragonstone, Yara and Daenerys sorted through Raven's reports. Sir Davos Seaworth, newly knighted and made master of ships, counseled reinforcement of coastal fortresses. Bran Stark, the new three-eyed raven, spoke in riddles of a coming storm. Tormund Giantsbane, invited as envoy of the free folk, warned that his people would seek refuge south of the wall when the cold grew beyond bearing. Daenerys folded her hands. Then the realm must stand together as one body. We cannot allow petty disputes while the dead gather beyond our borders. Yara sheathed her sword. The drums of war will sound once more, this time against an enemy older than any king. We will sail, ride, and march as one. Bow. As snow began to dust the battlements of Dragonstone, the two queens, one of fire, one of iron, prepared their realm for the greatest trial it had ever faced. And though winter's shadow fell long and cold, the promise of their alliance shone like a beacon. A new Westeros, built not on fear, but on courage, compassion, and the unbreakable bond of dragon and kraken. To be continued. Kai. E. The winter wind howled through the shattered battlements of Dragonstone like a chorus of restless ghosts, heralding the long months to come. Frost glazed the carved dragon heads that adorned the parapets, and the black water bay lay dark and unending beneath a leaden sky. Yet within the great hall, Yara Greyjoy and Daenerys Targaryen met with their closest advisors around a candlelit table hewn from the bones of ancient ships. Sir Davos Seaworth traced a finger along a map of the narrow sea. "The Iron Islands will stand most of all," he said, voice rough. "But the coasts of the Stormlands and the Reach, where gales and ice meet for the first time, will need garrisons and provisions. If a storm surge breaches their walls, we risk famine." Yara dipped a quill in ink. "I will dispatch 20 longships filled with salted fish, grain, and firewood to the Westmarch and Haystack Hall. My captains know those shores. They will winter there." She paused, eyes narrowed. "And we will build seawalls where we can. A few months' work now will save lives later." Daenerys nodded. "Send word to Lord Baratheon's sons, the Stormland Stormborn bastards. They will need to marshal their own levies to reinforce the Dornish border. We cannot spare all our men here." She tapped a smaller map. "We must also consider the Riverlands. Harrenhal's walls held in summer, but with ice on the Green Fork the old stones will crack. I will send builders from King's Landing to shore up the North Tower." Maester Orwyn, newly appointed Master of Whisperers, cleared his throat. "Reports from beyond the wall are dire. The nights grow colder every fortnight, and the white winds are carried by stiffening gales. The free folk say the dead move in columns, hunting livestock, and the unwary. A few wildling clans already seek refuge south of the wall, but the night's watch is thin." Menaranti. Daenerys laid a hand on the dragon-etched table. "We made our peace with the Watch when we rebuilt Eastwatch by the sea. We will send supplies, wood, food, metalwork, and one of our dragons to soften the wall's northern ice. Then Davos and Tormund can ferry refugees to safe valleys in the north." Tormund Giantsbane burst in, cloak dripping icicles. His grin was fierce even in the cold. "The free folk will fight the dead," he boomed, "but they will not starve in the snow. Let them keep their customs, skinchangers, rowdy feasts, even their hair braids, but under the queen's protection. They owe no fealty, only gratitude. Now, Yara met his eye. So it shall be. And for every wildling we shelter, we gain a warrior who knows the dead's cunning. She turned to Daenerys. And when the war comes, we will ride dragons and ships against the enemy. The realm must hold as one. As plans for the long winter took shape, Daenerys slipped away one night to the dragon's roost atop Dragonstow's highest tower. Through frosted windows she watched Rhaegal and Viserion breathing puffs of steam, scales glittering like gemstones in torchlight. Drogon, restless, paced the ramparts below. Yara found her there wrapped in furs. "They sense it," Yara said softly. "The darkness that comes." Daenerys nodded, hair drifting around her pale face. "They remember how to burn the dead," she whispered. "But they cannot unfreeze the living." She touched the stone floor. "I fear for those in the cold, even with our fleets and levies. The wall cannot hold forever against ice and magic." "Da." Yara placed a hand on her shoulder. "We will stand our ground. The horn of Winterfell will sound when the dead press south, and Jon and Sansa will answer. Our levies will march with us. Stormlanders, Reach knights, Dornish spearmen and ironborn reavers. We will fight on foot, on horse, on dragon. However we must." Daenerys looked out over the bay, where the sea was dark as ink. "And when victory comes, we will have bound the Seven Kingdoms forever. Not as conquerors and conquered, but as stewards of one realm." Bam! Winter deepened into ice and shadow, but the alliance held fast. In the north, Yara's longships delivered provisions to White Harbor and Deepwood Moat, while the Unsullied manned the walls, eastern towers, and trained wildling recruits in phalanx formations. In King's Landing, the small council redistributed funds to pay soldiers guarding the river crossings, and grain from the Reach traveled under escort to Last Hearth and Winterfell. At Winterfell, the Great Hall's hearth blazed day and night, its stones glowing warm as the bones of a dragon beneath snow. Sansa Stark received envoys from Dorne and the Vale, mediated by Yara's captains and Daenerys' maesters, and Tyrion oversaw a rotating schedule of patrols through the Wolfswood. The Starks, once cruel to the Ironborn, now dined alongside them at long oaken tables, sharing venison and salt herring. But as the wind shrieked outside, death crept closer. A scouting party of wildlings reported a ridge of ice crags shifting unnaturally, and the woods beyond Winterfell glimmered with pale shapes. Then, under a moonless sky, the horn of Winterfell sounded, low, mournful, and filled with warning. Yara and Daenerys rode north atop Rhaegal and Drogon, silver and coal-black flames curling from their nostrils. Beneath them, knights and reavers, spearmen and archers, marched northward, GD footfalls crunching in snow. At the wall, the ancient edifice rose like a frozen storm, its white stone crowned with icicles and drifts. On the other side, the plain lay empty, until the ground convulsed with 1,000 muffled thumps. The dead emerged in columns, gray-eyed wights in tattered cloaks, skeletal husks in ancient mail, and beyond them, giants of ice, brandishing tree trunks as clubs. The Night's Watch held fast at the gates, but innumerable foes pressed against them like a rising tide. Daenerys raised her whip, voice echoing across the ice. "By fire and blood we will hold the wall." With that, Drogon dove into the ranks of the dead, his flame igniting the ice wights in a conflagration that shone like sunrise across a frozen sea. Rhaegal and Viserion followed, blasts of emerald and ivory flame carving circles of heat through the army of the dead. Yara led the Ironborn from the left flank, axes keen and shields braced. Beneath Drogon's thunderous arc, she vaulted from his back, charging into wights whose flesh cracked and steamed beneath dragonfire. For the Kraken and the dragon. She roared, and beside her wildling berserkers shouted their own war cry. Blood mixing with ice in a dance of steel, the battle raged through the night, a whirlwind of flame and frost. Sword met bone with ringing clangs. Arrows arced through black sky to pierce white hearts. Giants fell beneath grafted-on blades handled by wildling champions. Daenerys, atop Drogon, unleashed torrents of fire until the wall itself shuddered. But her resolve never faltered. She would break this wave of death. As dawn crept on the frozen horizon, the columns of the dead began to waver. The Night's Watch surged through the breach. Wildlings cut down final stragglers, and Yara's axe severed the head of the ice giant at the gate. A cheer rose, brief and raw, as the horde dissolved into embers and steam. Daenerys landed, cloak singed but spirit unbowed. She dismounted, white hair streaked with ash, and embraced Yara. "We have held," she panted. "But the silence to come. What shall we do then?" Yara drew her sword from a white's frozen rib. "Then we chase them back beyond the wall. The dead cannot stand long in daylight. We will march north again when the thaw begins, and push the horror out of our world." Then Narwanti. Daenerys placed a hand on the wall's ancient stones. "A new song for the wall, Hand of the Sea. A song of living fire." Yara sheathed her blade. "A song we will sing together." And so, with shattered battlements behind them, and a world of winter still to traverse, the Dragon Queen and the Sea Queen set their banners flying over ice and snow, bound by war, by hope, and by the unyielding promise of a realm saved through unity. The dawn following the wall's defense broke in a pale wash of light, revealing the scarred white expanse where the dead had fallen. Snowflakes drifted through the cold air like drifting ashes, settling upon the shattered remains of the White Army. Yara Greyjoy stood at the summit of the wall's shattered gatehouse, frost clinging to her braided hair, as Daenerys Targaryen descended from Drogon's back. Around them, the Night's Watch tended wounded brothers, while wildling healers moved among the fallen with herbs and salves. Yara sheathed her blood-flecked axe, breath steaming. "We held," she said simply, the weight of the long night still heavy in her voice. "But the dead will rise again. We cannot leave this place as it is." Daenerys nodded, reaching out to touch the ancient runes carved into the wall stones. "We must seal the breach," she agreed. Rhaegal, melt the shattered gate. Viserion, clear the rubble." The dragons descended, their flames dull and controlled, but hot enough to fuse ice and stone back into a semblance of solidity. The thrumming heat echoed in the hollow chamber as men and beasts worked in concert. Below, Jon Snow rode up from Eastwatch, Ghost at his side, flanked by Knights of the Vale and Stark bannermen. His eyes were grim. "The dead came so fast," he said, dismounting to approach the queens. "They came in numbers no one believed possible." Yara met his gaze. "We have faced the storm before, Lord Snow. We will face it again and drive it back." Jon's breath rasped. "When the thaw comes, I will lead scouts north to find the resting places of the largest host. We must destroy them before they reassemble." Daenerys placed a hand on his arm. "We will ride with you. Dragons and ships alike. The realm owes you more than words can repay." "Now," he bowed his head. "Then let us be on our way." Over the next weeks, as the broken gate fused, and the wall's watchtowers were reinforced with ironwood beams, the allied hosts prepared for the advance beyond the wall. Wildling clans gathered beside the Night's Watch, their numbers bolstered by ironborn warriors who, armed in mismatched plate and mail, learned quickly the tactics of woodland skirmish. Northerners drilled in formation beside Stormlander knights, while Dornish spearmen drilled alongside Reach archers. In the courtyards of Eastwatch, the banners of Dragon and Kraken flew alongside the Direwolf and the Crow. Yara and Daenerys convened once more within the wall's inner fortress, the air still sharp with the scent of burnt ice. Maps were spread across a frost-coated table, crags of black ice, frozen riverbeds, and the vast wasteland beyond the Gift. Reports indicated that the largest gathering of the dead lay near the haunted forest of Fang Hollow, where ancient weirwood roots had fed the Night King's army for centuries. "We strike at dawn," Daenerys said, voice echoing. "We fly above the worst of the cold while our ground forces advance through the forest's edge. We cut off the dead's heart and scatter the rest to the winds." Jon drew his sword Longclaw, its Valyrian steel blade gleaming. My brothers and I will lead the infantry through the old ranger paths. Yara ships, these boats you brought to Eastwatch, will cross the frozen lake and hit the dead from the west. Yara traced the route with her finger. Yes. My captains have converted 3 longships into ice skimmers, reinforced keels and runners on their hulls. We will cross the lake's surface at speed and emerge behind their lines. Daenerys looked from one leader to the next. Tyrion Lannister, Grimshaw the wildling chieftain, Sir Davos, and even Tormund Giantsbane, his greatcoat dusted white. We ride as one, she said. No king or queen at our head, only our shared duty to save the living. A hush fell, the gravity of the moment settling like fresh snow. Then, one by one, each leader placed a hand upon the map. The raven's fist, the direwolf's paw, the kraken's tentacle, the dragon's claw. Beneath a starless sky, the allied force moved out. Wildling scouts lit smoky braziers to guide the columns through the forest's edge, and the night air was muted, broken only by the crunch of boots on snow and the distant cry of a winter raven. At the lake's edge, Yara's ice skimmers waited, their hulls carved with runes of the drowned god for good fortune. Ironborn rowers, their faces set, leapt aboard. Above, Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion took flight, their wings stirring up drifts of snow as they soared toward Fane Hollow's gnarled treetops. Daenerys rode Drogon's flank, cloak billowing, while Yara grasped Rhaegal's scaled horn with one hand, gripping her axe in the other. The wind tore at her cloak, carried the roar of dragons and the chant of ironborn war songs. At their signal, a horn blast from Jon Snow, Yara's ice skimmers glided across the frozen lake, cutting through dark water beneath a crust of ice. Then, at full speed, they burst through, splinters of ice flying as the ships continued across the open water trapped beneath. Emerging on the far shore, ironborn warriors leapt onto the ice-packed beach, axes raised, and fell upon the rearmost wights, with a cry that echoed among the trees. Jon's infantry, clad in thick furs and leather, moved through the forest trails, Longclaw cleaving through frozen flesh as they pressed toward the dead center. Wildling giants uprooted trees to fell columns of wights. Dornish spearmen formed pikes to hold off skeletal cavalry. Reach archers found perches and loosed shafts that shattered bone shields. Above, dragons swept in and out, flame arcs tracing crimson trails across white snow. Yara leapt from Rhaegal's back at the heart of Fang Hollow, her axe cleaving wights in two while her reavers secured the fallen weirwood roots, their veins of magic that had fueled the Night King's power. As she severed each root with dragon steel, the surrounding wights convulsed and crumbled, their necromantic spark snuffed out. Daenerys landed beside her, brow streaked with ash. "We must burn the greatest root," she said, pointing to a massive, pulsating trunk entwined with a ring of dead stones. "Drogon's flame alone can ignite it." She climbed onto the root's knotted surface, sword drawn, and signaled for Drogon. The dragon descended, nostrils flaring, and unleashed a torrent of fire that engulfed the root. A shockwave rippled through the forest as the magic core collapsed, and a roar, neither human nor dragon, shook the air. With the heart destroyed, the army of the dead around them halted, then fell inert as if the wind had been knocked from their bones. A final cry rang out, a keening lament that faded into silence. Yara watched as the pale bodies vanished like mist in sunlight, leaving only the living, breath steaming, amid the ruined woods. "Is it done?" Jon asked, stepping through the drift. Daenerys dropped to her knees, hand on the charred wood. "It is done," she whispered. "The dead will not rise again." Yara stood, surveying the gray clearing. "The realm endures." She turned to her queen. "Let us return and bring the news of dawn." When the allied leaders reconvened atop the wall in the days that followed, the celebrations were subdued, a quiet relief rather than raucous joy. The ancient barrier, thou by dragonfire and rebuilt by the living, stood as testament to what unity could achieve. Daenerys addressed the gathered hosts. The wall stood for 1,000 years, he said. It failed us once. But today, we have shown that the living can hold what the dead once claimed. Let this be our vow, that no darkness, no force of death, will ever again cross the wall. Yara stepped forward, cloak dusted with frost. And let it stand not as a barrier of separation, but as a symbol of unity, that every man, woman, and child in Westeros rises to defend one another against any threat. She dipped her head. The Ironborn swear it. The Wildlings, the Stormlanders, the Reachmen, the Dornish. Each of us, one realm, one people. A cheer rose, echoing off the wall's heights, and whipped by the wind into the open lands beyond. Dragons roared in reply, and Ironborn drummed upon shields, while Wildling horns blared northward. In the quiet that followed, Daenerys turned to Yara, violet eyes reflecting the pale sun. We have saved the realm together. Now we must heal it. Yara grasped her queen's hand. We will heal it together. And so, beneath the silent watch of the wall and the endless sky beyond, the Dragon Queen and the Sea Queen sealed their legacy with a promise that the Seven Kingdoms, once sundered by fear and war, would stand united as long as Dragon and Kraken held fast, and as long as living fire guarded against the dark. Spring melted into summer, and the realms of Westeros began to breathe anew under clear skies. Fields once sodden with blood and frost bloomed with corn and barley. Gardens unfurled blossoms of rose and hawthorn. The citadels and keeps rang once more with laughter and song. Yet Yara Greyjoy and Daenerys Targaryen understood that true peace required more than seasonal warmth. It demanded the tending of hearts and minds, as well as stones and soil. In the gardens of Dragonstone, where dragons had once roared overhead, gentle fountains now tinkled between beds of lavender and rosemary. Here, Daenerys convened a gathering of farmers and merchants from every kingdom. Yara stood beside her, clad not in armor, but in a simple gown of sea-green wool, her hair braided with strands of silver and black. The people spoke of customs once forbidden. Dornish vintners eager to teach Ironborn vine-tenders, Reach bakers exchanging recipes with northern brewers, and Iron Island salt workers offering their knowledge to Dornish salt flats. Daenerys addressed the assembly. We have fought not for conquest, but for a realm that carries its burdens together. Let trade bind us as firmly as any oath. She unveiled a charter of commerce, its parchment curled at the edges, and sealed with wax bearing the joined sigils of Dragon and Kraken. Signed by crown and hand, and witnessed by every lord and lady present, this charter guarantees free access to markets, fair tariffs, and protection for caravans and convoys on land and sea. Hands raised in applause, and Yara lifted Daenerys' arm in triumph. Beneath the arched trellis, merchants nodded and smiled. Once wary rivals, now bound by shared profit. Meanwhile, across the narrow sea, emissaries carried word of the alliance's success to Volantis Lys and Pentos. In Old Town, the Citadel's newly appointed loremasters compiled volumes not only of ancient lore, but of living knowledge. Breeds of grain, techniques of masonry, methods of shipbuilding. Maesters from Yara's islands contributed treatises on deep sea nets, while those from the Reach offered studies on crop rotation. Soon, the Hightower Library welcomed not only scholars in black, but smiths and farmers, eager to learn and teach. Back in King's Landing, the Red Keep's great hall brimmed with music and laughter at the first Feast of Unity. Tables groaned under the weight of dishes prepared by cooks from every province. Dornish spiced oranges, Northland salt-cured elk, Reach strawberries gilded with sugar, Ironborn seaweed bread filled with mussels and herring. Yara and Daenerys dined side by side, toasts raised in common tongue and low Valyrian alike. Between courses, lords and ladies danced the cat's paw jigs of the Riverlands and the stately minuet of the Reach. Even Sir Tormund Giantspan attempted the Vale reels, his great frame knocking against tables but eliciting roars of laughter. Daenerys leaned close to Yara, smile soft. Who knew the world could taste so sweet? Yara's laughter was low and rough, but warmth shone in her gray eyes. A realm united shares not just burdens, but joys. Yet the work of healing could not rest upon feasts and charters alone. In the north, Sansa Stark and Jon Snow labored to rebuild Winterfell's shattered walls and drought-parched fields. Under Yara's instruction, ironwood girders were imported, and northern carpenters learned to work the resilient wood into beams and shingles. In return, Jon's rangers taught ironborn marksmen the secrets of tracking through deep forests and across rolling moors. One dawn, Yara journeyed to the Godswood alongside Sansa Tut. A new sapling, a scion of the ancient heart tree, had been gifted by the people of the Reach. Beneath its emerging canopy, Yara knelt in the frost-kissed grass and pressed her fingers into the moist earth. "This tree will grow strong as our alliance has," she murmured. "May its roots bind us as firmly as iron." Sansa placed a hand upon her arm. "You have taught me that strength need not be cruel. You have shown me that honor can be tempered by mercy." The Lady of Winterfell looked into Yara's face, gratitude shining. "For that, I owe you far more than I can ever repay." Yara rose, her heavy cloak brushing the ground. "Then hold true to our oaths, Lady Stark. For oaths are the bones upon which kingdoms stand." In the Stormlands, the Baratheon bastards, once fractured by rivalry, met at Storm's End under Daenerys' banner. The four brothers squabbled at first over who would command the Stormlances, but when the Wall's hounds returned burned and ragged, bearing tales of the dead reborn, they fell silent at the sight of Drogon's black silhouette against the storm-laden sky. Daenerys addressed them with calm authority. "You are Stormborn, born to endure the fiercest winds," she said, voice cutting through thunder. "Your loyalty to the crown ensures that no hurricane of chaos will ever again batter these lands unchallenged. Unite your houses under our peace, and the dragons of the north may roam free once more." "Mensa." The brothers exchanged glances, then one by one knelt upon the field's battered sod, pledging their swords. Yara, astride her own mount, watched with approval. When the sun finally broke through gathering clouds, it cast a shaft of light upon the battered walls of Storm's End, and the gales died to a whisper. But not all hearts bent swiftly to unity. Deep in the Marches, Lord Butterwell of Golden Grove refused to ratify the Commerce Charter, claiming the Ironborn would overfish his rivers. In the dusty halls of Casterly Rock, a small cadre of Lannister retainers grumbled that the Targaryen claim remained weak, and that the Greyjoy alliance was an affront to the realm's traditions. Yara took up the challenge herself. Under escort of a dozen cloaked knights, she traveled into Butterwell's lands. Her longship beached on the gentle bend of the Honeywine. She found the Lord angry and stubborn, surrounded by his stewards. Without a court or guards, she walked unannounced into the great hall, her presence alone a statement. "Lord Butterwell," she called, voice echoing. "I come not to destroy but to offer you prosperity." She produced a small satchel of golden stag coins. "This is half a year's levy in advance. Spend it as you will, on repairs, on feasts, on charity. Then sign the charter and let Golden Grove feed the realm." Butterwell's eyes widened, his hand trembling as he accepted the coins. For a moment, he stood silent as he counted them. Then, with a huff, he scrawled his mark at the bottom of the charter. Yara took the parchment and folded it crisply. "May your lands flourish," she said, and departed, leaving Butterwell to ponder that mercy could be as heavy a hammer as steel. Time passed, and the grip of war loosened at last. In Old Town, the Citadel published a new series of volumes titled The Living Realm, highlighting stories of cooperation across borders. In the red fields of Dorne, orchards of olives and pomegranates spread northward, overseen by ironborn gardeners who learned to coax fruit from sun-baked soil. In the Western Islands, villages built upon craggy shores prospered as shipwrights crafted vessels designed for both war and trade, their keels now bearing barrels of wine and salt, rather than only raiders' spoils. In King's Landing, the Red Keep's new towers arched skyward, their foundations reinforced with ironwood from the north and quarried stone from the Vale. Minstrels composed new ballads, the Kraken and the Dragon, the Wall's Last Song, the Feast of Brothers. Courtiers learned that allegiance was won not by fear, but by fostering hope. And throughout it all, Yara Greyjoy and Daenerys Targaryen moved as one. Two queens bound by shared ordeal. They rode together on their dragons, quelling frontier skirmishes with words before blades. They seated themselves at council tables to fashion laws that balanced mercy and justice. They comforted orphans in Storm's End and counseled scholars in the Citadel. They stoked furnaces to forge new axes and hammers, and they planted seeds in fields that once only bore ruin. In the final days of the season, as the sun stood high in the sky, the two queens returned to Dragonstone for a private hour. Atop the highest turret, they watched the calm sea, where white gulls wheeled above fishing boats and merchant galleys. Below them, the courtyards echoed with the laughter of children. Some Greyjoy, some Targaryen, some born of the north, the Reach, Dorne, and beyond. Daenerys turned, her cloak of dragon-scale silk gleaming. "We shaped a different world," she said, voice soft as the waves below. Yara smiled, amber eyes reflecting sunlight. One built on the ideals of iron and fire, not to dominate, but to protect. She took a deep breath of salt and sea. The Iron Throne remains, but it rests in the hands of those who would lift all up, not hold them down. Daenerys nodded, violet gaze distant. "When our time ends, may they remember us not as conquerors, but as mothers of a new age." Yara placed her hand on the stone parapet, careful to feel the warmth still radiating from the sun-baked granite. "And may our names live on in song, long after the dragons are gone." They stood in silence, queens tethered not by blood, but by purpose, a bond stronger than steel, forged in war and tempered in peace. As the sun set over Dragonstone, its last rays gleaming like embers in the sky, the two figures remained, watching their realm flourish beneath the promise they had kept, that fire and iron united would guard the light of Westeros for generations to come.